Hello, and welcome. Tonight, you will be listening to a quiet exploration of the darker side of ancient Egyptian belief. In this video, we focus on two powerful gods whose nature inspired both reverence and fear. Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of war and divine punishment, and Set, the god of storms, chaos, and conflict. These gods were not villains, but forces of destruction that ancient Egyptians believed were necessary to maintain balance in the world. They represented violence, disorder, and the harsh realities of life in the ancient past. As we move slowly through their stories, we will explore how fear itself became sacred, and how even cruelty had a place within Egyptian mythology. So get comfortable, relax, and let your mind drift back to ancient Egypt, where the gods were powerful, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. Sekhmet is one of the most striking and powerful figures in all of ancient Egyptian mythology. To the people of the Nile, she represented the dangerous side of nature: heat, illness, war, and the forces that could not be controlled by human hands. Yet at the same time, she symbolized protection, cleansing, and the kind of strength that keeps a kingdom safe. In Egyptian belief, power always came with two sides, and Sekhmet was the perfect example of this balance. She was usually shown as a lioness, or as a woman with the head of a lioness, with the fierce expression of a hunter and the steady presence of a guardian. Her head was often crowned with a sun disk, connecting her directly to Ra, the great sun god whose energy sustained life, but could also scorch the land. When the Egyptians imagined Sekhmet, they saw the part of nature that humans could never tame. They understood the Nile, the crops, the seasons, and the practical needs of daily life. But they also knew there were forces beyond their control. The heat of the desert, the sudden spread of disease, the unpredictability of conflict, and the intense winds that rushed across the sand were all experiences that shaped how they saw the world. Sekhmet became the divine face of these realities, embodying the idea that strength, danger, and protection often arise from the same source. When people looked at her statues, carved with sharp lines and smooth surfaces, they were reminded that the world was not only gentle, it could be fierce, and that fierceness deserved respect. Her origins, according to myth, reveal how the Egyptians tried to explain the presence of overwhelming power. There is a scene in ancient texts in which humanity begins to act in ways that threaten the natural order. They grow proud, rebellious, and careless of the divine balance that holds the world together. Ra, who created them and watched over them, becomes troubled. He sees their disobedience as dangerous and seeks a way to restore order. In his frustration and worry, he releases a part of his own essence, a force shaped out of divine fire and anger. This force takes the form of a lioness, and from that moment, Sekhmet enters the world. She does not walk quietly. Her arrival is described as a moment of great heat, as if the sun itself had stepped onto the earth. People flee at the sound of her roar, which carries across the desert like a storm. Her movement is swift, decisive, and impossible to resist. The myth describes her power increasing the longer she continues her task. What began as a punishment for human rebellion becomes something unstoppable. She hunts through the land with a determination that feels absolute. As more people fall before her, Ra begins to regret what he has done. Sekhmet is fulfilling her purpose, but her purpose has grown beyond control. The story doesn't explain this change as malice or evil. Instead, it shows how divine forces, once set in motion, can act with a momentum of their own. Even gods must think carefully about the powers they unleash. Ra then chooses a different approach. Instead of confronting Sekhmet directly, he seeks to calm her by reshaping what she sees. He orders a mixture of beer and red ochre to be spread across the desert floor, so it resembles blood glistening in the sun. When Sekhmet arrives, she sees what she believes is the result of her own victory. She drinks deeply from the pools of red liquid, and as the powerful beer fills her body, her rage softens. The great lioness slows, stumbles, and eventually falls into a deep sleep. When she awakens, she is no longer driven by the fire of divine punishment. She transforms into a gentler goddess, often linked to Hathor, whose nature is joyful and calm. This story was important to the Egyptians because it showed how balance could be restored, not by force, but by cleverness, timing, and understanding the nature of power. Sekhmet's association with the lioness is important because lions held a special place in Egyptian culture. In the ancient world, lions were not mythic creatures. They lived in the desert, hunted near the edges of settlements, and represented a very real danger. They were admired for their strength and feared for their unpredictability. Lionesses, especially, were known as the primary hunters of their prides, providing both food and protection. By choosing the lioness as her form, the Egyptians captured something fundamental about Sekhmet. She was both guardian and destroyer. Her instincts were sharp, her judgment swift, and her force undeniable. The desert itself, harsh and vast, became part of her identity. When the sun beat down with intense heat, or when hot winds rushed through the land, people felt her presence in the natural world. Temples dedicated to Sekhmet were places of respect and caution. Her main cult center in Memphis was known for its carefully structured rituals performed every morning. Priests would begin by cleansing the temple, lighting fragrant incense, and presenting fresh offerings of bread, meat, and cooling water. They performed chants spoken softly but firmly, ensuring that Sekhmet would remain peaceful and aligned with the order of Ma'at. These rituals were not just symbolic. In the Egyptian worldview, neglecting a god could invite imbalance. If Sekhmet was honored properly, she could protect the land from illness, invasion, and natural disasters. If she was ignored or angered, her presence could bring fever, misfortune, or intense heat. What makes Sekhmet particularly fascinating is her role in Egyptian medicine. She was believed to be capable of sending illness, but also capable of curing it. This dual nature made her one of the most important deities for healers and physicians. Many doctors were trained in her temples, combining practical knowledge of herbs, bandaging, and surgery with spiritual rituals meant to calm her influence. The Egyptians kept detailed medical papyri, including famous documents like the Ebers Papyrus, which contains remedies and diagnostic techniques. Some of these practices were linked to Sekhmet's priesthood, showing how the spiritual and physical worlds were seen as inseparable. If a fever grew too strong, if an infection spread, if a wound would not heal, it was believed that part of Sekhmet's attention had turned toward the patient, and priests worked to shift that attention back to protection rather than harm. Her statues, especially those created during the reign of Amenhotep III, reveal how deeply she was trusted to guard the kingdom. Over 700 statues were carved of Sekhmet during his time as pharaoh. They were placed in long rows around temple complexes, like an army of stone guardians watching over the land. Each statue was carved from dark granite, giving it a sense of weight and permanence. Their faces were carved with a calm but focused expression, as if the goddess were eternally alert. The massive number of statues was not an artistic choice alone. It was a spiritual strategy. Egypt may have faced illness or instability during that period, and the king responded by surrounding himself with the protective presence of the lioness goddess. Walking among these statues must have felt both humbling and empowering. The air would have carried the scent of incense, and the flicker of lamps would cast shadows across the polished stone, making the eyes appear almost alive. The Egyptians also believed that Sekhmet influenced the passing of seasons and the yearly cycle of the Nile. During the hottest months, when sickness was more common and the fields grew dry, her power was considered especially strong. There were festivals held to appease her and to cool her energy. People sang songs, played instruments, and offered large quantities of beer as a reminder of the myth in which her anger was softened by drink. These gatherings were not chaotic celebrations, but structured rituals that connected communities through shared belief and a desire for stability. In times of crisis, whether through environmental challenges or military threats, more offerings were made to Sekhmet, in hopes that she would defend the land with her fierce strength. Even though her nature could be harsh, the Egyptians did not fear her in the way modern audiences might imagine. They respected her. They saw her as a divine necessity, a reminder that life is not sustained by gentleness alone. Order must be maintained, danger must be recognized, and strength must be honored. Sekhmet represented the clear-eyed understanding that survival requires both care and force, both healing and defense. Her presence in temples, in medicine, in myths, and in the hearts of the people of Egypt made her one of the most influential deities in their entire belief system. Her story did not stay the same throughout all periods of Egyptian history. Over time, different regions emphasized different parts of her identity. Some emphasized her healing role more strongly. Others focused on her protective nature on the battlefield. In every case, though, she remained a goddess who demanded awareness, balance, and respect. When people spoke her name in prayers or wore amulets shaped like her lioness head, they acknowledged that the world contains forces that are powerful, necessary, and sometimes difficult to understand. Sekhmet stood at the meeting point between what keeps life safe and what threatens it, reminding people that strength, when guided by purpose, is a sacred part of existence. As time passed and Egypt moved through different dynasties, Sekhmet's presence remained strong, but her meaning shifted gently to match the needs of each era. In periods of stability, she was seen more as a protector, a guardian who kept danger away by her very existence. In times of political stress or environmental challenges, her fiercer nature became more emphasized, as people tried to understand the difficulties around them. This fluidity made her a living presence rather than a fixed symbol. She grew with the kingdom, changing as the world changed, yet always recognizable in her power and authority. Egyptians did not think of their gods as distant beings who lived in a separate realm. Instead, the gods were woven into their daily lives, tied to the cycles of nature and the challenges of existence. Sekhmet, with her dual nature, was a reminder that life, even blessed by divine order, was never free from danger. In many temples, she was honored alongside gods associated with healing, moderation, and wisdom. This pairing was intentional. While Sekhmet carried the heat and intensity of a lioness, she was balanced by deities whose presence cooled, soothed, or enlightened. One of the most important of these was Ptah, the creator god associated with crafts, stability, and the foundations of the world. In Memphis, Sekhmet was often described as the consort of Ptah, forming a divine triad with their son Nefertum, a youthful god associated with healing, perfumes, and the gentle opening of the lotus flower at dawn. Together, the three represented a cycle of power. Creation, protection, and renewal. Sekhmet's sharp energy complemented Ptah's stability, while Nefertum softened both with beauty and fragrance. This triad was a powerful symbol for the people of Memphis, reminding them that creation needed protection and that even fierce strength could lead to new growth. The Egyptians believed deeply in this idea of divine families, and placing Sekhmet within such a structure gave her a place not just as a force of wrath, but as part of a larger cosmic harmony. In many myths, she protected Ptah's creations by guarding the boundaries of the world. In temples, her statues stood at entrances and thresholds, facing outward to confront anything harmful before it could step inside. The idea of the lioness as a guardian of gates and sacred spaces appears repeatedly in Egyptian iconography, showing how strongly they associated Sekhmet with the concept of protection through vigilance. Visitors to these temples would pass between rows of lioness statues or reliefs carved into walls, reminding them that to cross into a place of worship was to enter under her watchful gaze. Sekhmet's role as a protector was not only spiritual, but also political. Pharaohs, who were seen as living embodiments of divine authority, often turned to her for legitimacy and strength. Some rulers emphasized their connection to Sekhmet to show they were chosen not only to lead, but to defend their people. Reliefs on temple walls depict pharaohs receiving power from Sekhmet, sometimes shown as the burning force behind their victories in war. In these images, she stands behind the king, her lioness form ready to strike at his enemies, symbolizing that his military success was an extension of her divine wrath. In other depictions, she touches the king gently on the forehead, providing not violence, but protection and health. This dual aspect made her the perfect patron for rulers, navigating both external threats and internal challenges. Historical records suggest that during wartime, prayers and offerings to Sekhmet increased. Soldiers carried amulets embossed with her image, and commanders invoked her before leading armies. The Egyptians believed that Sekhmet, as a lioness, saw the battlefield clearly, understanding danger without hesitation. They sought her clarity and decisiveness, hoping she would guide their actions and protect them from harm. At the same time, they feared her ability to unleash destruction without limit. So rituals were held to ensure her power remained on their side rather than against them. This delicate relationship between reverence and caution shaped how she was worshipped. There are ancient inscriptions describing festivals held to calm Sekhmet at the end of military campaigns. After battles, when tensions were high and soldiers carried the emotional weight of violence, the priests performed ceremonies meant to release the heat of conflict from the goddess's presence. They believed that if the intensity of war remained active in her spirit, it could spread disease, unrest, or accidents throughout the land. By cooling her energy through offerings, music, and drink, they restored peace not only among the people, but also among the gods. These festivals often involved large gatherings, songs dedicated to Sekhmet, dancers wearing lioness masks, and recitations of hymns describing her protective nature. The idea of cooling Sekhmet also appears strongly in medical practices. Physicians associated with her temple learned to diagnose illnesses not only as physical conditions, but as signs that Sekhmet's attention had shifted in an unbalanced way. They treated fevers with cooling ointments made from herbs like mint, lotus, and myrrh, combined with prayers addressing Sekhmet directly. Their words often asked for her mercy, for her heat to fade, and for her protective aspect to rise. This blending of practical medicine and spiritual appeal was typical of Egyptian healing, and Sekhmet stood at the center of these methods. Her influence stretched from the battlefield to the medical clinic, from temples to family homes, and from royal courts to small agricultural villages. Many interesting archaeological discoveries have added depth to our understanding of Sekhmet's worship. One notable example is the excavation of hundreds of her statues at the Temple of Mut in Karnak. These statues had been buried deliberately in the temple complex, possibly during the reign of Amenhotep III, when they were originally created. The sheer number of statues suggests a ritual use that went beyond simple decoration. Some theories propose that they were arranged in large circles or rows to represent days of the year or phases of the sun. Each statue may have been used in a daily ritual, linking Sekhmet's protective energy to the passage of time. When the statues were unearthed, many showed signs of ancient repairs, meaning the priests cared for them actively, maintaining the physical embodiments of the goddess's power. Another intriguing discovery involves medical instruments found near areas associated with Sekhmet's priesthood. Bronze surgical tools, ointment jars, and papyri with detailed instructions on treatment reveal a level of medical sophistication that surprises many modern researchers. Although these tools were used by human physicians, the spiritual authority of Sekhmet formed the backdrop for their work. To practice medicine under her name was to acknowledge that healing was not only a matter of technique, but also of spiritual alignment. Illness was a disruption of order, and healing restored that order, just as Sekhmet's story showed how imbalance could lead to chaos and how wisdom could calm even the most powerful forces. Throughout Egyptian history, artists found different ways to depict Sekhmet. Some statues show her seated with the calm posture of a queen, her hands resting gently on her knees, symbolizing controlled power. Others depict her standing, holding a scepter and an ankh, ready to act. In some depictions, her mane is carved with great detail, each strand of hair representing the wildness of the desert. In others, her features are more stylized, emphasizing symmetry and serenity. Regardless of the style, the lioness head is always unmistakable, and her expression always carries a sense of alertness. Even when shown in a peaceful role, she never appears passive. There is a readiness in her posture that reminds viewers that stillness, for a lioness, is simply a moment before movement. Her presence extended far beyond statues. Amulets shaped like her face were worn for protection against sickness and misfortune. Small bronze figures of her were placed in homes, buried in tombs, and carried by travelers. These objects, though small, were considered powerful because they connected the wearer to the divine force of Sekhmet. By wearing her image, a person symbolically carried a shield of fire and strength, trusting that she would guard them from unseen dangers. In times of fear, people held these amulets tightly, reciting simple prayers learned from childhood. The words varied, but the meaning was constant, a request for Sekhmet's protection and her restraint, for her to guard them without unleashing her destructive heat. The worship of Sekhmet also reflects how Egyptians understood death. While she was not a goddess directly associated with the afterlife like Osiris or Anubis, her power was believed to reach into that realm. Some texts describe her as a guardian who stood at the boundaries between life and death, allowing passage only when the soul was ready. Other texts portray her as a fierce defender of the cosmic order, striking at forces that threatened the peace of the deceased. In this way, she played a subtle but meaningful role in funerary beliefs, reminding people that death like life, needed protection from chaos. As centuries passed, Sekhmet's identity sometimes blended with other lioness goddesses, such as Tefnut and Bastet. This blending did not erase her unique character, but showed how flexible and interconnected Egyptian mythology could be. In some regions, Bastet, who was usually gentler, absorbed qualities of Sekhmet, becoming more protective during periods of instability. In other regions, Sekhmet took on attributes associated with healing from lioness goddesses connected to fertility and motherhood. These shifts demonstrate that mythology was not static for the Egyptians. It evolved as the needs of the people evolved, with Sekhmet always maintaining her core identity as a being of strength, necessity, and balance. Each generation of Egyptians brought new interpretations to her story. Priests wrote new hymns praising her ability to defend the innocent scribes copied old myths, adding details that reflected the concerns of their time. Artisans carved new statues in fresh styles, blending traditional elements with contemporary aesthetics. Ordinary people, living through droughts, floods, political changes, or personal hardship, turned to Sekhmet with their fears and hopes. Through all these changes, one theme remained constant. Sekhmet represented the truth that life itself contains both danger and protection, both heat and healing, both destruction and renewal. Her worship did not vanish abruptly when Egypt changed rulers or religions. Even in later periods, when Greek and Roman influences blended with Egyptian culture, her image persisted. Some temples adapted her symbols to new artistic styles, while others preserved her traditional lioness form. Unchanged travelers and scholars from other cultures wrote about her with fascination, noting how deeply the Egyptians respected her. Even if they did not fully understand her role, they recognized the immense presence she held in the hearts of the people today. When statues of Sekhmet are displayed in museums or excavated from ancient temple sites, they still carry a striking intensity. Visitors often describe feeling a sense of awe when standing before them. The smooth stone, the sharp lines, the upright posture, and the focused gaze create an impression of a being who is both ancient and timeless. This reaction is not an accident. It is a continuation of what the Egyptians intended. They carved Sekhmet to be a reminder of strength, courage, and the delicate balance that holds the world together. Her presence was meant to inspire respect and awareness, and even after thousands of years, she continues to do so. Sekhmet's story is not just a tale of punishment or divine anger. It is a story about understanding the world's complexity, accepting that forces beyond human control exist, and recognizing that these forces are part of the natural order. The Egyptians lived closely with the land, the climate, and the cycles of the Nile, and they learned from these experiences. They understood that creation and destruction are both necessary, that health and illness are part of the same cycle, and that strength must be guided by wisdom. Sekhmet embodied all of these truths, making her one of the most profound and enduring deities in their beliefs. As the worship of Sekhmet continued across centuries, her influence spread into many aspects of everyday life, shaping how Egyptians viewed danger, protection, and even personal responsibility. People believed that the gods observed not just great events like wars or natural disasters, but the smaller patterns of daily behavior. Sekhmet, with her watchful lioness eyes, became a symbol of awareness and accountability. Her presence reminded people that actions had consequences, that disrespect or imbalance could invite danger, and that living with integrity was part of maintaining harmony in the world. This belief was tied deeply to the principle of mayat, the Egyptian ideal of truth, balance, and proper conduct. Sekhmet's fierce and protective nature served as both a warning and a reassurance that balance would be preserved, whether gently or with force. In many households, families kept small offerings dedicated to Sekhmet in simple shrines. These offerings were often placed in quiet corners, where incense might be lit at dawn or dusk. People left bread, cool water, flowers, or small figurines representing lionesses, believing that these gestures helped keep the goddess calm and benevolent. Her presence was not seen as something distant or unreachable. Instead, she was understood as a powerful force woven into the rhythms of life, always nearby, always watching over the fragile stability of existence. In times of illness, it was common to recite short prayers, asking her to remove the heat of fever or to guard against misfortune. Villagers spoke of her with caution but also trust, acknowledging that even though she was fierce, her strength served a purpose. In the context of the wider Egyptian pantheon, Sekhmet's character offered a unique perspective on how the gods functioned together. While gods like Thoth represented wisdom and writing, and Isis represented magic and protection, Sekhmet represented the raw force needed to defend the cosmic order. She was sometimes described as the protector of the gods, a role that placed her at the front lines of the struggle between order and chaos. Stories about mythical battles describe her fighting against forces that threatened the stability of creation, such as serpent-like beings or spirits of darkness. These stories were not meant to frighten people, but to reassure them that danger existed beyond the visible world, and that powerful protectors stood between humanity and the unknown. One fascinating aspect of Sekhmet's mythology is her connection to the yearly cycle of the sun. Ra's journey across the sky was seen as a daily triumph over darkness, but his journey through the underworld each night was more dangerous. Some texts suggest that Sekhmet accompanied Ra during these nighttime journeys, guarding him against threats in the darkness, especially against Apophis, the great serpent of chaos. This association shows how central Sekhmet was to maintaining the cosmic cycle. Without her, the sun might not rise, and life would fall into darkness. The idea that she guarded the sun god at his most vulnerable moments made her presence feel essential, not only in the earthly realm, but in the divine realm as well. Temples that honored Sekhmet often held seasonal rituals that reflected the agricultural and climatic patterns of Egypt. One of the most important periods of ritual activity occurred at the start of the inundation season, when the Nile began to rise. Although Sekhmet was not directly associated with flooding, her control over heat and illness made her crucial during times when water levels changed, insects multiplied, and sickness was more likely to spread. Priests performed ceremonies, asking her to protect the people from diseases that often accompanied seasonal change. These rituals included music, chanting, incense, and offerings of cool liquids, connecting natural events to divine influence. There are ancient hymns that describe Sekhmet as the one before whom evil trembles, and the one who drives away sickness. These hymns do not portray her as a deity who punishes without reason. Instead, they emphasize her strength as a shield against harmful forces. The language in these hymns is calm and respectful, reflecting the Egyptians' understanding that respect was the key to maintaining harmonious relationships with the gods. Even when acknowledging her ability to bring destruction, they approached her with humility and gratitude. They believed that her fierce nature was a gift, and that the world would be far more dangerous without her powerful presence. In artistic representations, Sekhmet was sometimes shown with symbols that deepened her connection to healing and protection. In some sculptures, she holds a papyrus scepter, representing life and renewal, In others, she holds the Ankh, the symbol of life itself. These symbols remind viewers that her power was not solely destructive. It was also life-giving, in the sense that it cleared the path for health and balance. In many ways, Sekhmet's dual nature mirrors the cycles of nature. Fire that destroys old growth but makes room for new life. Heat that sterilizes even as it causes discomfort. And storms that cleanse even as they disrupt. The daily life of her priesthood also offers insight into how Egyptians viewed her. Unlike some priesthoods that focused mainly on ritual, the priests of Sekhmet combined ritual responsibilities with practical healing. Their work required both spiritual grounding and medical knowledge. They studied the human body, observed symptoms, and developed techniques that were advanced for their time. They used splints for broken bones, treated wounds with honey to prevent infection, and used herbal mixtures for various ailments. Their understanding of the body, though different from modern science, was built on careful observation and centuries of accumulated knowledge. To them, healing was a sacred duty, and Sekhmet's guidance was essential to their work. The connection between Sekhmet and medicine becomes even more interesting when considering the role of women in Egyptian healing practices. In some periods, women served as healers or midwives, and they often invoked Sekhmet during childbirth, asking her to protect the mother and child. Childbirth was considered a vulnerable time, and the presence of a strong goddess who commanded both life and death provided comfort. Amulets shaped like small lioness heads were sometimes placed near birthing beds or hung in homes to invoke her protection. These practices show how deeply her influence extended into daily life, touching even the most intimate and personal moments. In times of crisis, such as plagues or widespread illness, Sekhmet's presence became even more central. Historical records speak of periods when disease spread rapidly through Egypt, and during these times, rulers and priests organized large-scale rituals to calm her fiery nature. These rituals sometimes lasted several days, involving music, chanting, offerings of food and drink, and long recitations of hymns. Participants asked Sekhmet to turn away her burning face and allow the breath of life to return. These words suggest that people believed her intense attention was responsible for sickness, but they also believed sincerely that she could be convinced to bring relief. Some scholars believe these rituals served not only religious purposes, but also practical ones, helping communities come together during difficult times. The shared experience of prayer, music, and communal gatherings strengthened social bonds and offered emotional comfort. Even if people did not fully understand the causes of disease, they found meaning in responding collectively through rituals. This sense of unity was crucial for maintaining stability in times of fear. Sekhmet, as a goddess who embodied both danger and protection, became a central figure in these communal responses. The idea of cooling Sekhmet's energy appears in many texts. The Egyptians believed that emotional states and spiritual forces had temperatures, and that anger or illness had heat, while peace and health had coolness. Rituals often involved cool water, blue or green stones, and fragrant oils meant to represent calmness and relief. Priests sometimes poured water over statues of Sekhmet, symbolically reducing her heat. The idea was not to weaken her, but to restore balance. A calm Sekhmet was a powerful protector. An enraged Sekhmet was a force of chaos. Egyptian ritual practice aimed to maintain her in a state of balance, reflecting the broader belief that balance was the foundation of a successful life. Her influence even reached the world of dreams. Egyptians placed great importance on dreams, seeing them as messages from the divine. Some dream interpretation texts mention visions of lionesses or fire as symbols connected to Sekhmet. A dream of being chased by a lioness could indicate that the dreamer needed to correct some aspect of their behavior or realign with Ma'at. A dream of receiving water from a lioness could symbolize healing or divine protection. These interpretations were not meant to frighten people but to guide them, helping them understand how their actions aligned with the cosmic order. Sekhmet's connection to the stars also appears in certain fragments of ancient texts. Some sources suggest that she was associated with specific constellations or celestial phenomena, symbolizing her presence in both the earthly and heavenly realms. The Egyptians often linked their gods to stars or planets, believing that the heavens reflected the actions of the gods. Sekhmet's connection to the sun, combined with possible links to other celestial bodies, made her a figure who existed in multiple layers of reality. She was present in the heat of the desert, the cycles of the sun, the protection of temples, the healing of bodies, and the movement of the stars. This multi-layered presence made her feel immediate and far-reaching, giving people comfort in knowing that a powerful force watched over both the physical and spiritual worlds. Another remarkable aspect of her worship is the Festival of Drunkenness, a yearly celebration believed to reenact the moment when Sekhmet's rage was calmed by the red beer. Participants drank large amounts of beer, danced, sang, and created an atmosphere of release and joy. Though the festival may sound chaotic by modern standards, it was highly symbolic. It represented relief from fear, the calming of danger, and the restoration of harmony. It also served as a reminder that even the fiercest forces can be softened through unity, celebration, and gratitude. The festival's timing often coincided with the start of the inundation season, linking Sekhmet's calming to the renewal of the land. When the Nile rose and spread fertile soil across the fields, people saw this as a sign that balance had been restored and life could flourish again. In addition to rituals, art, and community practices, Sekhmet had a significant philosophical role. She represented the truth that life included struggle, uncertainty, and difficult choices. Her presence encouraged people to face challenges with courage. She was a reminder that strength could be a form of compassion, especially when directed toward protecting the vulnerable or preserving order. Many modern interpretations of Sekhmet focus on this aspect, seeing her as a symbol of resilience, determination, and clarity. While ancient Egyptians did not describe her in these modern terms, the essence of her character aligns with these ideas. Her identity also shaped how the Egyptians viewed leadership. A good leader, in their eyes, needed to embody both calm wisdom and fierce protection. This duality was essential for maintaining stability. Pharaohs were expected to act decisively when necessary, protecting their people from threats, while also showing restraint and ensuring fairness. Sekhmet's mythology offered a model for this kind of leadership. By invoking her during ceremonies or depicting her alongside royal figures, they emphasized that leadership required the same balance she represented: strength guided by purpose, power tempered by wisdom. As Egypt moved into later periods, including the Greco-Roman era, her worship continued, but took on new forms. Greek and Roman writers who visited Egypt noted her statues and described her as a powerful, fearsome goddess, though they did not always fully understand her dual nature. Some compared her to deities from their own pantheons, such as Artemis or Athena, but these comparisons only captured parts of her identity. Sekhmet remained uniquely Egyptian, tied to the land, the climate, and the worldview of a people who lived in direct relationship with their environment. Even after her temples fell out of active use, her statues remained standing for centuries. Travelers wrote about seeing rows of lioness figures in deserted temple complexes, half buried in sand, but still imposing. The durability of her statues, often made from dark granite or basalt, made them resistant to weather and time. They continued to watch over the ruins long after their rituals had faded. Modern archaeologists who encounter these statues often describe a feeling of awe or quiet intensity when approaching them. Their craftsmanship, symmetry, and expression create a sense of presence that transcends time. Sekhmet's influence did not disappear entirely even after ancient Egyptian religion declined. In the modern era, she has become a symbol of empowerment for many people who study mythology, spirituality, or ancient cultures. Her image appears in art, literature, and personal practices that draw inspiration from ancient Egyptian beliefs. While these modern interpretations vary, the core ideas they express, strength, balance, resilience, and protection, reflect the qualities that made her so important to the Egyptians themselves. Her story continues to resonate because it speaks to universal truths about life's challenges and the strength needed to face them. Today, when people reflect on Sekhmet's identity, they often see her as a reminder that life requires both gentleness and fierceness. She represents the heat that purifies, the courage that protects, and the determination that overcomes obstacles. In a world where uncertainty and difficulty are still part of daily experience, her ancient lessons remain meaningful. The Egyptians understood that strength, when aligned with purpose and guided by wisdom, is a stabilizing force. Sekhmet embodied that truth thousands of years ago, and she continues to embody it now, her lioness gaze still as steady and powerful as ever. Even as centuries passed and the land of Egypt changed under new rulers, shifting borders, and evolving cultures, the memory of Sekhmet lived on in the stories people told and the artifacts they left behind. Her name continued to be spoken in quiet conversations, in teaching about ancient traditions, and in the way people described forces that were too strong to fully understand. Long after her temples fell silent, her presence remained woven into the character of Egypt itself. Its heat, its courage, its struggles, and its enduring commitment to maintaining balance in a world shaped by both order and unpredictability. In looking at the legacy she left behind, it becomes clear that Sekhmet was never meant to be viewed only as a goddess of destruction. Her fierceness was not reckless or malicious. It was purposeful, directed, and deeply tied to the preservation of Ma'at, the cosmic balance that defined Egyptian life. When people turned to her for protection, they were not asking her to attack without reason. They were asking her to guard what mattered, to watch over their families, their communities, and their land with the vigilance and clarity of a lioness protecting her pride. Even her connection to illness, which might seem frightening at first glance, carried a deeper meaning for the Egyptians. They saw disease not as random misfortune, but as a sign that something in the world had shifted out of balance. And Sekhmet's attention, whether gentle or harsh, was needed to restore stability. Her role in healing reflects this understanding beautifully. In the Egyptian worldview, healing was not something that happened in isolation. It required harmony between the body, the spirit, and the environment. Sekhmet's priests, who studied medicine with remarkable care, approached healing with the belief that they were working in partnership with her. When they applied herbal salves, set broken bones, or recited diagnostic spells, they did so with the intention of guiding the patient back into alignment with the natural order. The idea that the same force capable of causing illness could also cure it created a sense of completeness. It reflected the Egyptians' belief that every source of danger also held the potential for protection if understood and approached correctly. Modern researchers who examine ancient medical texts or analyze the remains of temples dedicated to Sekhmet often remark on how advanced the Egyptians were for their time. Their understanding of anatomy, their use of antiseptics like honey, and their detailed notes on symptoms reveal a strong foundation of practical knowledge. But what makes their medical system unique is the way it intertwined with spiritual belief. Rather than seeing medicine and spirituality as opposing ideas, the Egyptians blended them seamlessly. And at the center of that blend stood Sekhmet, whose connection to both suffering and healing made her an essential figure in understanding the complexities of health. Her influence on daily life also appeared in the architecture and layout of temples. Many temple complexes were designed with specific alignments that allowed the rising sun to illuminate statues of Sekhmet at certain times of the year. This created moments of powerful symbolism, when her connection to the sun and its life-giving force became visually clear. Some archaeologists believe these alignments were intended not only to honor her, but to remind people that her fierce energy was part of the cycles that sustained life. The light of dawn touching her statue each morning symbolized renewal and stability, a sign that another day had begun and that the balance of the world was intact. It is also interesting to consider the emotional reactions she inspired. Whereas some gods evoked comfort or joy, Sekhmet's presence evoked respect, an almost instinctive awareness that she represented forces beyond human control. Yet this respect was not rooted in fear alone. It was also rooted in trust. Egyptians trusted Sekhmet to defend them, to punish their enemies, to protect the righteous, and to keep destructive forces at bay. This trust was reinforced through festivals, rituals, and daily practices that emphasized her role as a guardian. Even the festival of drunkenness, with its lively music and abundant beer, was ultimately a celebration of relief, a moment when the community acknowledged how close the world had come to danger in mythic times and how balance had been restored. The more one studies her mythological role, the more it becomes clear that Sekhmet embodied the idea of responsibility. She was not a goddess who acted without cause. She acted in response to imbalance, injustice, and disrespect for divine order. Her fire was meant to cleanse, not to destroy without reason. Her heat was meant to protect, not to scorch aimlessly. The Egyptians saw in her a reflection of life's most difficult truths, that strength can be necessary, that change sometimes requires discomfort, and that the forces that challenge us can also shape us into something stronger. Her mythology also influenced how Egyptians understood personal character. Just as Sekhmet moved between fierceness and gentleness, people were encouraged to balance their own emotions. They were taught to act decisively when needed, but also to show restraint. They learned that courage was not just about fighting threats, but also about facing uncertainty, enduring hardship, and standing up for what was right. These lessons were not written as direct teachings from the goddess, but her presence in their culture shaped their understanding of what it meant to live with integrity. Egyptians also recognized that the world's challenges were not just external. They believed that internal imbalance, emotions like anger, jealousy, or recklessness, could create disorder in one's own life. Invoking Sekhmet in these moments was a way of acknowledging that even inner struggles required strength and clarity to overcome. In this sense, she served as a guide for managing the complexities of human emotion, reminding people that the fiercest battles often take place within. Her story also reveals how Egyptians understood the passage of time. They saw history not as a linear sequence of events, but as a series of cycles of growth and decline, heat and coolness, danger, and safety. Sekhmet's transformation from wrath to calm, from fire to gentleness, mirrored these cycles. She represented the idea that even when life becomes overwhelming, periods of peace and renewal will follow. This perspective brought comfort to people who lived in a world where the Nile's rhythms determined their survival. It gave them a way to understand both prosperity and hardship as natural parts of life's flow. Even in the modern world, where many of the challenges faced by ancient Egyptians no longer exist in the same form, Sekhmet's symbolism still resonates. People recognize in her the qualities of strength, transformation, and resilience. They see in her story a reminder that balance must be maintained, that challenges can be overcome, and that even fierce forces have a place in the natural order. Museums that house her statues often describe visitors pausing longer in front of her than in front of other figures, drawn by something quiet but compelling in her expression. Even without active worship, her presence remains powerful. Seeing her as the Egyptians did, an essential force in a world shaped by both creation and danger, allows us to appreciate the depth of her character. She was not just a goddess of war or illness. She was a guardian of life, a protector of cosmic order, a healer, and a symbol of strength used with purpose. She taught that fire can purify, that danger can drive growth, and that power, when guided by wisdom, maintains harmony. With Sekhmet's story explored in its fullness, we can now move to another figure whose role in Egyptian mythology shaped the understanding of chaos, unpredictability, and transformation. Whereas Sekhmet represented controlled power and purposeful protection, the next god embodies the raw, untamed energy of the desert and the storms that sweep across the land. His identity is complex and often misunderstood, yet his presence was just as essential to the balance of the world as Sekhmet's. As we leave the lioness goddess behind, we turn now toward the shifting sands and the howling winds to understand the being who ruled them, a god whose name carried both fear and fascination throughout ancient Egypt: Set. Set has always occupied one of the most complex, misunderstood, and fascinating places in Egyptian mythology. To the people of the Nile, he was not simply a god of chaos or storms. He was a divine force woven into the very structure of the world, a presence that could bring destruction, yet also essential protection. Set represented everything unpredictable: the desert winds that whipped across the sand without warning, the violent storms that rose suddenly in the western horizon, and the wild, unbounded energy that lay beyond the orderly world of the Nile. While some gods symbolized stability and harmony, Set embodied the other side of existence, the side that refused to remain still. To understand him fully is to accept that the Egyptians did not divide their gods into good and evil. Instead, they saw them as necessary forces, each playing a role in maintaining the delicate balance of the universe. Set's very appearance reflected this complexity. Unlike Sekhmet, who was represented as a lioness, or Horus, who appeared as a falcon, Set's form did not match any real animal. His head had a long, curved snout, upright rectangular ears, and a stiff, forked tail. Modern scholars often describe it as the Set animal, because it combines features of animals that exist with traits that do not. This intentional ambiguity reflected Set's nature as something outside easy definition. He was not a creature of the familiar world. He was a symbol of the unknown, the unpredictable, and the boundaries that separated civilization from chaos. His red color, often used in artwork to depict him, symbolized heat, danger, and the desert, the harsh, burning regions west of the Nile where life struggled to survive. The Egyptians divided their land into two primary regions: the fertile black land along the Nile, where crops grew and people lived, and the red land, the desert, stretching endlessly outward, filled with danger, thirst, and uncertainty. The red land was Set's domain. It was where the winds rose suddenly, where sandstorms raged, and where travelers risked becoming lost. While the black land represented community and stability, the red land represented everything that lay beyond human control. To the Egyptians, life could not exist without both. The fertile region depended on the protective edges of the desert, and danger always existed beyond the horizon. Set embodied this reality. He was the god of the places where life thinned, where order weakened, and where survival depended on strength, awareness, and resilience. To understand Set's importance, we must look at one of the central roles he played in Egyptian mythology: his connection to the nightly journey of the sun. As Ra traveled through the sky each day, he brought light, warmth, and life. But when the sun set each evening, Ra entered the Duat, the underworld. It was here, in the deepest darkness, that he faced his greatest enemy, the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of total chaos and the eternal threat to creation. Each night, Apophis attempted to swallow the sun, to end its journey forever, plunging the world into darkness without dawn. And each night, the gods gathered to protect Ra. Among them, the one who stood closest in the battle was Set. This part of Set's mythology is often overlooked, but it reveals how the Egyptians truly understood him. While he embodied chaos on Earth, he was also one of the most powerful defenders of order in the cosmic realm. Only Set had the strength and raw power to stand against the serpent of absolute darkness. Each night, he guarded Ra's solar bark, striking down Apophis and ensuring that dawn would return. Without Set, the sun might never rise. Without his strength, chaos would swallow creation. This duality, being a force of chaos yet also the defender against a greater, more destructive chaos, made Set an essential part of the cosmic balance. His role was not comfortable or gentle, but it was necessary. The Egyptians believed that even the most untamed forces had a place in the world, and sometimes only something wild could protect life from what lay beyond. Despite this heroic role, Set's mythology also includes stories that reflect the darker, more destructive side of his character. The most famous of these is his conflict with his brother Osiris. According to myth, Osiris was a wise and beloved ruler who brought agriculture, justice, and civilization to Egypt. People flourished under his guidance, but Set, associated with envy, ambition, and the unpredictable forces of nature, grew resentful. The story describes how Set plotted against Osiris, trapping him, sealing him inside a decorated chest, and casting him into the Nile. This act marked the beginning of a long conflict between Set and the family of Osiris, a conflict that shaped much of Egyptian mythology and explained the cycles of leadership, legitimacy, and struggle. After Osiris disappeared, his wife Isis searched tirelessly for his body. Her devotion and her magical power eventually brought Osiris back to life, though only in the realm of the dead, where he became the lord of the underworld. When Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis, grew older, he challenged Set for the throne of Egypt. Their struggle lasted many years, filled with battles, competitions, and even moments of unexpected cooperation. Unlike modern stories where good easily defeats evil, the Egyptians told this myth as a complex tale of balance. Horus represented rightful leadership, order, and stability. Set represented the necessary but dangerous forces that threatened and tested leadership. In the end, the gods awarded the throne to Horus, but they did not destroy Set. Instead, they gave him a role that suited his strength: protector of Ra's boat and ruler of the desert. This showed that even when Set caused disruption, he remained an essential part of the world. Order prevailed, but the force of chaos was not eliminated. The Egyptians understood that chaos was not something that could simply be defeated. It had to be contained, guided, and respected. Set's mythology reflects this truth. He was not banished or erased. He was given a domain where his energy could be both honored and kept at a distance. This understanding of chaos was deeply rooted in Egyptian thought. They believed that the world was constantly threatened by forces that could undo creation. Maintaining Ma'at, the principle of balance, required constant vigilance, not just celebration of harmony. Set represented the challenges that kept life sharp and alert. Without him, the world might grow stagnant or vulnerable. With him, the world remained dynamic, tested, and protected. Set also played a major role in Egypt's understanding of foreign lands and people. Because he was associated with the desert and with regions beyond the Nile Valley, Egyptians often linked him to foreigners and distant territories. This did not always imply hostility. It simply reflected the idea that faraway places were unpredictable and different from the familiar rhythms of Egyptian life. Soldiers and travelers invoked Set for protection during long journeys across desert paths, knowing that the dangers of heat, dehydration, and bandits all fell under his influence. For them, Set was not a god to be avoided, but one to be respected and asked for strength. His ability to withstand harsh environments made him an ideal guide through the deserts that surrounded their world. In certain periods of Egyptian history, especially during the 19th dynasty, Set's importance grew dramatically. Pharaohs like Seti I and Ramesses II honored him highly, using his name as part of their own and building temples in his honor. These rulers saw Set not as a villain, but as a symbol of military power, endurance, and the strength needed to protect Egypt from external threats. During times when Egypt faced wars or expansions, Set's fierce qualities became invaluable. Soldiers carried his symbols into battle, and commanders invoked his energy before facing enemy armies. He was called upon to give courage, clarity, and dominance in moments of conflict, reflecting how his mythology aligned with the needs of the kingdom during turbulent periods. His worship during these dynasties was not seen as controversial. Instead, it was understood as a strategic embrace of a god whose qualities matched the moment. Just as Sekhmet's fierceness was invoked during times of illness or instability, Set's energy was invoked when Egypt needed strength and resilience. This adaptability shows how fluid Egyptian religious practice could be. The gods were not static figures locked into one interpretation. They evolved with the land, the politics, and the people. Set's character, though rooted in ancient stories, took on new meanings depending on the era. He could be a threat, a protector, an outsider, a warrior, or a guardian of cosmic order, all without losing his essential identity. As we continue exploring Set's presence across Egyptian history, the deeper connections between his mythology, the desert landscape, and the psychological realities of facing the unknown become even clearer. His story teaches that not all challenges exist to be defeated. Some exist to build resilience, sharpen awareness, and strengthen the very structures that allow life to flourish. Set's nature, fierce and unyielding, embodied the truth that existence required the ability to face uncertainty without collapsing under its weight. His presence in temples, myths, and daily practices reflected the Egyptians' understanding that strength and chaos were not forces to be eliminated, but forces to be integrated wisely. Even in the periods when Set was celebrated as a protector and a symbol of strength, the Egyptians never forgot that he represented forces beyond ordinary control. This duality is what made him so profoundly significant in their worldview. They understood that life, by its nature, contains both stability and disruption, and that leaning too heavily toward one side could create imbalance. Set stood for the necessary challenges that tested the resilience of kingdoms, families, and individuals alike. By acknowledging him, Egyptians acknowledged the realities of nature and human experience, that storms will come, that loss is part of the human story, and that facing unpredictability is part of what makes survival meaningful. As the centuries unfolded, Set's connection to foreign lands became even more pronounced. The Egyptians referred to the deserts beyond their borders as chaotic, dangerous, and inhabited by forces that did not follow the rhythms of the Nile. For the people living along the river, the desert represented the unknown, the uncontrollable, and the untamed. It was a place where life could vanish in a single moment, where water was scarce, and where caravans moved cautiously. Set was believed to walk these vast spaces, guiding those who respected him and testing those who did not. Traders, travelers, and soldiers who ventured into foreign territories often carried small charms or amulets bearing Set's image. These objects were not meant to calm him, but to acknowledge his presence. By carrying them, people showed respect to the god who ruled the places they were entering, asking for safe passage through lands governed by uncertainty. This association with foreign regions also shaped how Egyptians interpreted conflicts and diplomacy. When enemies threatened Egypt from outside, Set's energy was evoked to strengthen the resolve of soldiers and leaders. Pharaohs who saw themselves as protectors of Egypt's boundaries embraced Set as a symbol of their authority to fight back against external forces. The 19th dynasty, in particular, integrated Set heavily into royal identity. Names like Seti, meaning man of Set, carried prestige, reflecting not only the favor of a powerful god, but the readiness to confront danger with determination. During these periods, Set was honored in temples and depicted on monuments with the same reverence as other major gods. This rise in prominence shows how Egyptian religion responded to the political and military landscape. When the world outside grew dangerous, the Egyptians turned to the god who understood danger best. Yet even during Set's period of greatest acceptance, his mythology remained layered with complexity. The stories describing his conflict with Osiris and Horus were still part of cultural memory, reminding people that Set's power was not to be embraced lightly. Rituals dedicated to him often emphasized control and balance, acknowledging his strength, asking for protection, but also recognizing the importance of keeping his influence within proper boundaries. Priests who served Set were considered specialists in dealing with powerful, volatile energies. Their rituals required precision, respect, and understanding. They approached Set with the same care that one approaches a sudden storm or a dangerous wild animal, not with fear, but with awareness of the potential consequences. The mythic conflict between Set and Horus played a central role in shaping how Egyptians understood leadership, justice, and the natural cycles of tension and resolution. According to the stories, after Osiris was taken from the world of the living, Horus grew up under the protection of his mother Isis. When he was old enough, he challenged Set for control of the throne. This opened a long period of struggle. The gods themselves debated who should rule. Set, as the elder brother, claimed authority by age and strength. Horus, as the son of Osiris, claimed authority by lineage and justice. Their conflict became a symbolic representation of order, attempting to assert itself against the force of disruption. Some parts of the myth describe violent clashes between them, with Horus losing an eye in one of their confrontations. This wound eventually gave rise to the symbol of the Eye of Horus, which came to represent healing, renewal, and wholeness. In another episode, Set transforms into a hippopotamus, diving into the waters while Horus searches for him. In one contest, they race boats made of stone. These tales are filled with symbolic meaning and magical imagery, showing the struggle not just as a physical contest, but as a cosmic drama. Ultimately, after many disputes, trials, and interventions from other gods, the throne is awarded to Horus. But Set is not punished with destruction. Instead, he is given the role that matches his strength: guardian of Ra's solar bark, defender against Apophis, and ruler of the desert. This outcome shows that the Egyptians did not see conflict as something to be permanently erased. Instead, conflict needed to be resolved in a way that preserved the balance of the world. Set's role was affirmed as essential, even if it was no longer tied to the throne of Egypt. This resolution taught that power could be real without being dominant, and that a place existed for every force, even those that were dangerous or difficult to understand. One of the most profound aspects of Set's mythology is how it reflects the human experience of facing hardship. People who experienced loss, challenges, or unexpected change could look to Set's story and find a deeper meaning in their struggles. The Egyptians believed that chaos was not meaningless. It could reveal hidden truths, force necessary changes, or push someone to grow stronger. Set embodied these realities. His storms, both literal and symbolic, tested the structures of life. But after the storm passed, what remained was often clearer, stronger, and more resilient. In this way, Set represented the uncomfortable but essential truth that growth often comes through facing the unexpected. The desert, Set's domain, also played a major role in shaping his character. To the Egyptians, the desert was a place of mystery and challenge. It was beautiful in its own way, vast, silent, and filled with a sense of eternity. But it was also unforgiving. Travelers who entered the desert had to prepare carefully. They needed water, shelter, and knowledge of the environment to survive. This combination of beauty and danger mirrored Set's nature. The desert was also associated with spiritual trials. Hermits, priests, and seekers sometimes traveled into the desert to confront their fears or seek visions. Even if these practices were not directly linked to Set, the environment they entered was shaped by his influence. The desert became a place where one could confront the unknown within oneself. In many ways, Set represented transformation, not peaceful transformation, but the kind that occurs when old structures are challenged or broken apart. While Osiris represented continuity and stability, Set represented the forces that test that stability, sometimes violently. But both were needed. Without stability, life collapses. Without challenge, life stagnates. The Egyptians understood this dynamic deeply, and their mythology reflected it. Set was the necessary force that pushed against the boundaries, ensuring that order remained strong, not simply static. As time moved forward into the later dynasties, Set's reputation shifted once again. Foreign invasions, internal turmoil, and changes in political power altered how Egyptians viewed him. During the Second Intermediate Period, a group of foreign rulers known as the Hyksos controlled parts of Egypt. They admired Set and adopted him as one of their primary deities because they identified with his desert origins and his association with foreign lands. When native Egyptian rulers regained control, They viewed Set's popularity among the Hyksos as a sign that he had supported foreign domination. This political interpretation led to a gradual decline in his status. Myths that once portrayed Set with complexity began to emphasize his destructive aspects more strongly. Inscriptions were altered, images were adjusted, and Set became more closely associated with opposition to order. Yet even in this decline, he was never demonized in the way later religions treated destructive deities. He remained a force of nature, dangerous, but still acknowledged as part of the cosmic balance. His temples did not vanish overnight, and his image continued to appear in protective contexts for some time. Even when his reputation sank, the deepest layers of his mythology remained intact, reminding the Egyptians that the forces he embodied could not be denied or erased. This shift in reputation reveals something important about Egyptian thought. It was flexible. The gods were not fixed characters with rigid identities. They evolved with history, politics, and social needs. When Egypt was strong and expanding, Set was a symbol of power and courage. When Egypt regained control after foreign rule, Set became a symbol of tension and threat, reflecting the fears and memories of the time. Yet through all these changes, his core themes remained present: strength, unpredictability, endurance, and transformation. In personal life, Set's influence appeared in ways that may seem subtle but were deeply meaningful. People invoked him in moments of personal strength, when facing challenges that required courage or resilience. They turned to him when confronting injustice, danger, or situations where calm order was not enough. Someone embarking on a difficult journey might pray to Set for clarity and endurance. A soldier preparing for battle might ask him for strength and victory. A person facing turmoil might seek his guidance in navigating uncertainty. Set was not gentle, but he was honest. He represented the truth that life can be difficult, and that facing those difficulties requires courage and adaptability. His presence in art also reveals these themes. In some periods, Set was depicted standing strong, holding a woe's scepter, a symbol of power and dominion. His posture was confident, his gaze focused. Even in times when his reputation declined, artists still portrayed him with dignity, as if acknowledging that his importance extended beyond temporary political circumstances. In some reliefs, he appears alongside other gods, participating in rituals or assisting in cosmic duties. These images remind us that Set was never truly cast aside. He remained a part of the divine landscape, contributing to the balance that sustained the universe. One of the quiet but important aspects of Set's mythology is his relationship with the night sky. Some ancient texts link him to the Great Bear constellation, associating him with the northern sky and the idea of wandering stars. This connection symbolizes his unpredictable nature, his movement across the boundaries of the known world, and his role as a guardian against the cosmic serpent Apophis. By placing him in the sky, the Egyptians acknowledged that his power extended beyond the earth into the larger structure of the universe. His strength was needed not just in deserts and storms, but in the eternal battle that kept creation intact. The deeper philosophical meaning behind Set's story becomes clearer when considered alongside the principle of Ma'at. If Ma'at represented truth, harmony, and order, Set represented the challenges that tested whether that order was genuine and strong. Without challenges, harmony could become fragile. Without conflict, truth could go unexamined. Set's presence ensured that the structures of life remained meaningful and resilient. This did not mean that chaos was desirable. Rather, it meant that confronting chaos strengthened the foundations of order. Many ancient cultures told stories of gods or spirits who embodied chaos. But the Egyptians approached this idea differently. They did not place chaos outside the world, as an enemy waiting to invade. They placed chaos within the world, as part of the natural cycles of existence. Set personified this internal challenge. He lived in the world and influenced it, sometimes helping, sometimes disrupting, always forcing growth or adaptation. This view of chaos as intrinsic rather than external gave the Egyptians a sophisticated understanding of change. Instead of fearing chaos as something unnatural, they saw it as part of life that had to be acknowledged and balanced. This understanding becomes even more evident when examining how Set was invoked in magical texts. These texts, used by both priests and common people, often called upon Set to protect against malevolent forces or to grant strength in overcoming obstacles. The language used in these spells shows respect for his power. They did not beg him for mercy. They appealed to his strength, asking him to direct it toward a specific purpose. These spells show that the Egyptians did not see Set's energy as inherently harmful. They saw it as a tool, one that needed to be handled carefully, but could achieve great things when used wisely. In some cases, Set was invoked during times of political conflict or power struggles within the kingdom. Leaders who needed to assert their authority or defend their position turned to Set for the resilience needed to navigate difficult situations. Even when the mythology portrayed him as challenging rightful leadership, the deeper meaning remained. He tested legitimacy. Any leader who could withstand Set's influence proved their strength and worthiness. This connection between Set and political stability reveals how deeply intertwined mythology, leadership, and national identity were in ancient Egypt. His influence also extended into the psychology of the individual. Set represented the inner forces that could disrupt a person's life: impulsiveness, anger, ambition, fear. But he also represented the strength required to master these forces. People who studied the myths or participated in rituals understood that Set's energy was something to be recognized within themselves. This recognition did not mean embracing chaos, but acknowledging that suppressing powerful emotions could lead to imbalance. Instead, Egyptians sought to understand and guide their inner turmoil, transforming it into strength rather than allowing it to become destructive. In this way, Set served as both a warning and a guide for personal growth. Later interpretations from the Roman period and beyond often misunderstood Set, casting him purely as a villain. But the Egyptians themselves never simplified him this way. Even when his political reputation suffered, they did not erase his contributions to cosmic balance. They understood that the universe was vast, complex, and filled with forces that could not be neatly categorized. Set's presence in their myths was a reminder that life contains more than comfort, that strength is needed to face adversity, and that challenges shape the soul as much as blessings. Modern readers may find something familiar in Set's story. In many ways, he represents the aspects of life that test resilience. His storms and deserts mirror the emotional and personal storms people face today. His battles against Apophis reflect the need to confront fear, anxiety, or uncertainty. His complex relationship with leadership reflects the difficult decisions and responsibilities that accompany authority. And his transformations over time reflect how human understanding shifts in response to changing conditions. Set remains relevant because he symbolizes realities that all people face: the need to endure, adapt, and confront the unknown. Understanding Set as the Egyptians did means accepting that chaos has a place in the world, but not an uncontrollable one. It means recognizing that strength can be fierce, but still purposeful, and that challenges can become pathways to deeper wisdom. Set reminds us that balance is not achieved by avoiding difficulties, but by engaging with them intelligently. His presence in mythology shows that even the wildest forces can contribute to the harmony of the world, if guided with intention. As we come to the end of this exploration of Set's nature, his mythology, and his enduring influence, we see a figure who is neither villain nor hero, neither wholly destructive nor wholly protective. He is a force of nature, a presence that tests, strengthens, and reveals. He stands in the desert winds, in the shifting sands, in the storms that pass across the horizon, and in the moments of challenge that shape the human experience. And even in his most unpredictable form, he remains an essential part of the balance that defines the world of ancient Egypt, a reminder that life is both orderly and wild, stable and uncertain, peaceful and storm-driven, and that true resilience comes from understanding all sides of that balance. As we reach the end of our journey tonight, we can take a moment to look back at the world we've explored together. From the fierce, protective fire of Sekhmet to the unpredictable strength of Set, we've moved through the deeper side of ancient Egyptian belief, a side shaped not by comfort, but by power, challenge, and the forces that kept the universe in balance. The Egyptians understood better than most that life was built on opposing energies, and that both harmony and tension played a role in shaping the world. Through these gods, they found meaning in the storms, the heat, the dangers, and the mysteries around them. They learned from them, respected them, and trusted that even the harshest powers had a place in the order of things. These stories, carried across thousands of years, still speak to something familiar today. They remind us that strength can be gentle, that chaos can be necessary, and that balance is something created not once, but over and over again. And just like the ancient Egyptians who watched the sunrise after every long night, we can find comfort in knowing that even in uncertain moments, there are forces, both within us and around us, that help guide us forward. Thank you for spending this time with me, and for letting your mind drift through the quiet echoes of the ancient world. If you're listening while resting, I hope this story has helped you feel calmer, more grounded, and a little closer to sleep. And whenever you're ready to explore more of history's mysteries, I'll be here to guide you through them. Good night, and sleep well.